Hi everyone, and welcome to this video where we are going to be learning how to integrate ChatGPT into your UiPath robots. Right, so you can imagine the possibilities and the functionality that you'll be able to build within your bots. It's pretty much endless just by having this integration. So that's what we're going to be covering in this specific video. We're going to learn how to integrate the ChatGPT API from OpenAI into UiPath Studio. So what you want to do is you want to go to openai.com and then you want to click on this API button. Just a fun fact, OpenAI is actually one of Elon Musk's businesses that he started, currently run by Sam Altman, who's the ex-CEO of Y Combinator, the largest venture capitalist or accelerator in the world, pretty much. So here we're on the API page, and then you want to click on Docs. Okay, so this will take you to the documentation, and if we scroll down here, so under API reference, I've already read through all of this, but if you go to completions, you'll see over here there's an example request. So this here is the example request, and then these are the parameters that get entered into the body of the API request, and then this is an example of the response that it gets. So these two are the inputs, and then this is the output. All right, so you can have three different libraries you can use. You can either do this using curl, or you can use it with Python. All right, I'll show you how to do it with Python or with Node.js. So in our specific example, we're going to be using curl. That's the easiest to integrate with UiPath. We'll get back to this. First, let's go to UiPath Studio. I just created a new process called my ChatGPT activity. So if you're following along, you can go ahead and create a new process called my ChatGPT activity, or whatever you want to call it. And we can click Open Main Workflow. All right, next you want to go to Manage Package. All right, you want to go to Manage Packages, and then you want to go to All Packages, and you want to search the term web. And there's a specific one we're looking for, which is this one, UiPath.WebAPI.activities. This package allows you to use a specific activity called HTTP request, which allows you to do API calls directly within UiPath Studio. Cool. Now if you go to project, you should see that we should have UiPath.WebAPI.activities. Now if we go to our activities panel and you want to search for HTTP, you'll see now we have this activity called HTTP request under the web library. So you want to drag and drop that in. Okay, so you can see it gives us this request builder. I'm just going to click OK. Okay, and here is our activity where you can do API calls. And then these are all the properties on the right hand side that you need to enter. So fortunately, there's a quick way to do this. You can click import and you can simply paste in an example of a curl HTTP request, and it'll then auto-populate it like a wizard, as opposed to configuring everything manually. So let's go do that. I'll come back here, and here was our example request. H stands for headers. So these are two headers it gives. It's the content type, which is application/JSON. So that means we are dealing with JSON format. You can also see that this is a JSON format. It's got key value pairs. Okay, so comma separated inside of braces. That's the format of JSON. Okay, then we have authorization. All right, and then you can see it requires an API key. So we'll get to that in just a moment. And that's basically how you authorize whose billing account you're actually using to run these requests, because ChatGPT is not free. It's only free when you're using the front end over here. But if you want to use the API, it is a paid service. I think at the moment you do get $20 of free credit, but I might be wrong on that. Then D, this refers to data, specifically referencing the parameters. Okay, and these are all the parameters over here that it's referencing. So let's set this up. I'm just going to click copy. All right, make sure you are set to curl, so you're copying the right one. And then we can come back to Studio, go to import, paste in that curl request, click import. You can click validate if you want. You can see it says validation success. I'll click import, and you'll see how it auto populates the endpoint, the preview URL. The default is 60,000 milliseconds. All right, so that's basically, it'll take 60 seconds until an error occurs if the request is taking longer than 60 seconds. The request method is a post call. That's because it's sending data. All right, so it's a post request. Then accept as response. Over here it says the default's any. It should still work, but we know we're dealing with JSON as the response, and we know that because over here the response is a JSON format. So you can see there, oh, what did I do? So that's a JSON format. Okay, so back here, what do we need to edit? So what we need to edit here is the API key. Remember I said we need to get back to that. So there's two places we need to enter it. Over here where it says your API key, as well as over here. So I'm just going to press OK for now, just to leave that. And let's go get the API key. So we can come back to the OpenAI website, right? And you want to log in. So I'll click login. You might need to sign up if you don't already have an account. So just click sign up, enter your email address and whatnot. So I'm going to log in with my Gmail account. Okay, here we are. And once you've signed in, you can then click top right. It should say personal. And then you want to go to view API keys. Okay, so I'm going to click view API keys. And these are two API keys I've created in the past. I'm going to create a new one for this project. Just remember, an API key is a secret. You don't want to share it with anyone. So I'm going to delete this key once I'm finished with this project. I'm going to copy this. Okay, I'll click OK. We can also then go back to Studio. I'll go to Configure, paste it in there. Remember to keep bearer and space. All right, that's very important. You need to keep that space in as well. So only replace the text which says your API key. Then over here, your API key, I'll highlight that, Control V, and there you go. So now I've pasted in my API key there as well. So I'll click OK. If we come here, right, you can see under body, we need to enter the actual body of this request, which is the parameters. All right, so if we come here, you'll see this is the body. All right, so these are, if you look here, the only required parameter is the model. All right, so we know for sure we have to have the model as one of the parameters, and then of course we're using a prompt, so we need to have the prompt because that's the actual question that you ask the model. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones that you can also use, and these are used basically to adjust the model. You can adjust these parameters to make the output more accurate. So you can read up more about what these things do if you read these descriptions over here. So for example, with temperature, a higher value, the output is more creative, whereas a lower value like 0 will return more well-defined answers. So 0.9 is basically the highest and 0 is the lowest. Let's get into this. So we know we need to enter the body. If we click these three dots, we can see it requires a string as input. Okay, so let's do this. We can create a variable and we can call it our body input. Okay, I'll just call it body. All right, and for the variable type, I'm not going to keep it as a string. I'm actually going to set it as a JSON object. Okay, because it's easier to define properties with a JSON object. It's just better practice to do it that way. So I'm going to click this drop down, and then you want to click browse for types because it's not a default data type, and you want to search for JObject. So there it is. It's under the newtonsoft.json.link. I'll select that, and now we have our JSON object. Then whenever you create a JSON object, you have to initialize it. So you can usually do that in the default over here, or you can use an assign activity. I'm just going to do it here. I'm going to write new space J object, enter that, and then open and close. So this is basically just standard notation on how to initialize a JSON object inside of, well, with using .NET. Okay, so now we have a body variable. So for the body, we need to assign some parameters. All right, we know the default one is the model, and then we also need to use a prompt, and we can adjust some of these other ones as well if we want, but let me show you how to do that. Simply use, you can either use an assign or a multi-assign. I'll just use an assign activity. And then on the left-hand side, I'm going to use our body. All right, remember this is our JSON object. Open close brackets, and inside I'm going to write a string of the value of the parameter, which is, in this case, model. So we doing this model over here. So I'm going to write model. And then on the right-hand side, we need to put in a string value of the model we're using. So in this case, text DaVinci 003. If you want to learn more about models, you can click this button here, model overview. Let's check that out. Okay, and you'll see there's 3 different models. There's GPT-3, which is what is used over here. This is GPT-3. Then there's another model called Codex, which is in beta at the moment. It's pretty cool. It's used to generate code using natural language text. And then there's also a content filter, which is used to detect sensitive or unsafe information. So we're using ChatGPT 3. Okay, so I'll click that. And you can see these are the different models that are available that you can use. All right, so the best one at the moment, also the most expensive, is the text DaVinci 003. So you can see it even says it's the most capable model. Then there's other options which are also capable. Some of them are faster, but they're lower cost. So the cost does differ amongst these models. Okay, we'll get to the cost a bit later, but also something to note is the max request. So that's 4,000 tokens is the maximum. And you can usually check this out in the playground. If I come to playground over here, you can usually select which model you want to deal with. So in this case, we're selecting the DaVinci under GPT-3. And if you type text into this playground area, you'll see bottom right, it generates a number. So this number is a number of tokens. So 24 tokens are in the prompt. Okay. And that is basically where you get the number. So the more text you put, the higher the number of tokens are going to be. So this is 38 tokens, and you can see the maximum is 4,000 tokens. So that's actually the current limitation of GPT-3 at the moment. Your input can only be 4,000 tokens, and one token is like X amount of characters. I'm not sure exactly how it's calculated, but that's how it works. Back to this. So we have our assign. I'm going to call this assign model. All right, and we know we are going to be using this text DaVinci model. So I'm going to highlight that. I'll copy that and paste that over here. Now we also want to assign our prompt. So assign, and then I'm going to put the body. Okay, and then inside here we're going to write prompt, and this is very important that you write it exactly the same as it's written. APIs are usually case sensitive, so lowercase p, right, one word prompt, that's how it should be written over there, prompt. So then on the right hand side you can enter basically your input prompt. So let's create an argument for that. So I'll come to argument, and I'll create an indirection argument, and I'll call it, let's call it prompt. So I'll call it in prompt, and that's a string. Okay, let's set a default value. I'll say who are you? Okay, That's my question, who are you? Then the value we're assigning is our in-prompt argument. Right, so the in-prompt argument is getting passed to the body JSON object, okay, and then this body JSON object, we can pass it into our HTTP request. So in the properties panel, we can go down to body over here, make this bigger, and in the body we want to enter whole body, so I'll click Control Space and I'll select body. Now you'll notice we get an error, and if we come here you'll see the error we're getting is because it requires a string as input, but we are entering a JSON object as input. It'll also tell us that if we hover here, it says option strict on disallow conversion from object to string. So what do we need to do? We need to convert this object to a string. So how do we do that? We need to use a .NET expression for that. So we can ask ChatGPT. So this is a perfect use case of using ChatGPT to help you build your bot. So we can say I'll say what code can I use to convert a JSON JObject to a string using VB.NET ? See what it tells us. You can use JSON.convert serialize object method from the Newtonsoft JSON library in VB.NET. Cool. So here it shows us JSON.convert serialize object, and then over there you put your object. So in our case we were using the word body. In this case they're using the word obj for object. So let's take this expression. I'll copy the whole thing, paste this into this body section, okay, and then enter our body argument there. Click OK, and that error now went away. Awesome. So that means it's now got a string as the input. The other thing that I noticed is over here, the body format, it's XML. Remember when we configured this, it says accept response as. All right, so this is the response. This is now referring to the format of the body. So we know the output is JSON, but we also know the input is JSON because remember this is a JSON object. So it's not XML format, but rather JSON. So I'm going to say JSON, just like that. Okay, so that seems good. What else do we need to do here? The response. Okay, so we need to get the output from this HTTP request. So how do you get the output? We need to assign it to a variable. So here under output, there are a few different options. There's response content and response status. So we can create variables for both of those. Let's just first go check the type. So we can see it's a string. Okay, so let's create two variables. I'm going to click Control K and I'm going to call it response content. Enter. And I'll also create one here, Control K, and I'll call it response status. So now we have a variable for both our content and our status. So let's check this out. I'm going to use a message box. I'll drag the message box just below our HTTP request, and the output, let's first put our response status so we can see what the code is there, if it's a success or fail. Usually success is 200 and a fail is 400. Let's drag another message box just below that and enter in our response content. Okay. So remember we had as our default value for our in-prompt argument is who are you? So let's see if it gives us an answer. I'm going to run this. So we can see there, we get a message box with the code 200, which means it was successful. I'll click OK. And there is our output. So this looks like it worked. So you can see the output is in JSON format. Okay. And you can see here under text, it has the response, I am Jared, an engineer currently studying computer science. Right, that's a pretty weird answer, but that's clearly the answer it gave us for some weird reason. All right, probably because, I don't know, maybe because the temperature was set to 0. So there's creative, actually, I don't know. Anyway, I'll click OK. Cool, so that's great, that worked. If you're getting an error, what you might need to do is you might need to come to billing, okay, and you might need to add in a payment plan. So you need to basically create an account and connect your billing details. Right, so that's just something you need to note. Okay, and you can see here, I'll even show you under usage. Okay, so I've currently spent $3.32 out of my $20, because you can set a cap to how much money you want to send. So let me show you that again. Under billing, if you go to usage limits, you can set a hard limit and a soft limit. So hard limits, basically, it won't spend any more money than that. The soft limit is it'll send you a notification email once you've passed that amount. So there is a way to control that so it doesn't just charge your account like everything that's in your account, you know, because especially when it comes to building bots and you have things running in loops, you could literally stack up your bill, your API request bill. So that's why you need to be very, very careful. So I'd also recommend, if you're doing this, just come here, set a hard limit, set it to something small, like $5 or whatever, just so that you can play around with this. Okay. Where were we? So we got the output as a JSON. All right, even though it was showing as it was displaying it as a string, because response content, remember, is of type string. But what we need to do is we need to access those specific values out of that JSON body. So the easiest way to do that is actually to first convert that string back into JSON, and then you can extract values using the keys from that JSON object. So let me show you how to do that. So there's two ways you can do that. You can either use the activity called Deserialize JSON. So if I search JSON, it's this one here. What this will do, this will take as input, a JSON string, all right, which is what we have over here. Response content is a string, and as output, it will return a JSON object. So you can see here under the type, it's of type object. So let's, I guess we can use this, but let's go back to ChatGPT and let's ask it. Let's type that worked, thank you. How do I convert, or let's just use the same question. I'm going to say, what code can I use to convert a string to a J object using VB.NET? So it's telling us you can use JSON convert.deserialize object. Okay, let's check if this works. Of object JSON string. Okay, so it's telling us we can use this. Let's go see. So we were using this deserialized JSON. Let's go use an assign. And first want to even check is that even a function. So we can go JSON convert dot deserialize object. Looks like it'll work. Deserialize object, and then you say of J object. So you need to add that. Of J object, and then on the right hand side we need to put our string, which is our response content. Okay, I'm going to click OK. This should actually be on the right hand side of the assign, so I'm going to Control X and Control V, and then on the left hand side I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call it, what are we going to call it? What do they call it here? They call it JSON object, so I'm going to call it that as well. JSON object, and remember the type, to set it to of type JSON object. There it is. And I'm going to delete this deserialize. On the left hand side I'm going to put JSON object. See if that error goes away. There you go, went away. That's awesome. Okay, so that's a good sign. Next step, okay, if we come back here, you're going to see the output, all right? The output looked something like this, okay? And it contains this choices, and this is an array. You can see it's an array, and then there's one item in that array, and the first item contains this body with the key text and the value. This is indeed a text. So we need to now extract this part out. So let's try that out. I'm going to try pull out just the choices. So let's see if this works. Coming back here, we can use a message box, and I'm going to put our JSON object that we just converted. Remember, this was a string. It's now been converted into JSON. Now that it's in a JSON, we can put brackets, double quotes, and then you can write content. I believe that was the word. Sorry, it was choices, my bad. Choices, and let's run this and see what it returns. So there was no error, which is great. Now let's see. So this was the original message box. So now we're just trying to extract the array of choices. Let's see if that worked. And it did. There's our array. Awesome. You can see there's our square brackets, and there is the one item inside the array. So we were able to get the array. Now the next step is to try and get the text. All right, so if you know how arrays work, you can basically reference each item in an array. So this is the first item in the array, so it's position 0. All right, if there was a second item, if there was another set of curly brackets with things inside it, that would be the index position number 1, and then the third position would be index position number 2, etc. So to extract this first one, we can use 0, and then we can use the word text as the key to extract this value over here. So I'm going to press OK, and let's test that out. So by the message box, I'm going to say JSON object choices, and then I'm going to put our index of 0 to grab the first array item. Then I'm going to put brackets again, and I'm going to write text, because now I'm grabbing the key from that, so I can extract the value from the key text. Okay, I believe that should work, and that should give us just the answer. So let's run this. There's our first message box. It's the second one with the whole JSON object. And there you go. Here is our answer. I'm a cognitive psychologist and a professor of psychology. Perfect, so that worked. So now the last thing we need to do is simply just assign that to our output argument. So we can use an assign activity just below that. And on the left hand side, we can have our argument. Oh, we haven't created one yet. So let's go to arguments, click create argument. And this one is going to be set in the out direction. Okay. And you'll see in a later video why I'm busy setting directions here. I'm going to write out underscore, and we can call this, what's a good word? Text, answer, result, response. Let's just say answer. Out answer. Okay. And save to out answer. And the value is this expression here that we had in the message box. So I'm going to copy, paste that there. Cool. And our out answer, let's make sure it's a string. It is a string. What's it telling us? It's telling us it needs to be a string. So let's just go and use a .to string just so that it knows it's a string. .to string. There you go. And I'll press OK. Cool. I'm now going to delete all these message boxes. We don't need them. That was just for testing along the way. Okay. What might be good actually is I'll just use a write line just to log the response status. Like that. Response status. And then .to string because it's an integer. There you go. And I'll delete this message box. Great. So this is looking good so far. I'm also just going to rename this assign prompt. Write response status. Assign. Over here, I'm not going to call it assign. I'm going to say convert string to J object. And then over here, I'm going to say extract text from J object. Okay, so there we have it. We have successfully built this. The last thing I would do, I guess, is maybe you can use a log message to log the answer to the output panel. So I'll use a log message and I will use the info and let's log the out answer. Cool. So now our arguments, okay, where's our arguments? Here's our imprompt. Let's ask it a different question. Let's say what is the best UiPath, or let's say what is the best RPA software? Let's run this. So let's check the output. There's our answer. The best RPA software can depend on what your particular needs are. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. That's fine. So we have successfully been able to integrate ChatGPT into UiPath using the OpenAI API. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please do like this video and subscribe to the channel. And we also have a part 2 to this video, and maybe there might be a few more parts after that, where we are going to be applying this to a real world project. That's what I have this Excel spreadsheet for. We're going to take all this unstructured data. This is basically data on a whole bunch of users who have deleted Facebook, This is the reason they entered as to why they're deleting the platform. And then we are going to basically try and convert this into structured data and put all these answers into certain buckets so that you can actually visualize this data on a graph. So that's the next steps. It's very exciting, and I hope to see you in the next video.